Quartermaster General South Front, new installment in the Quartermaster General system. It's a system that I enjoyed very much from the very beginning, and now we are on the South Front of World War II. Yes, the South Front, not exactly or only North Africa, although the strip of land is there, the seesaw action between Tripoli and Egypt will occur. However, we have two mounted boards that you need to place next to each other, and clearly they are also designed to then be combined with larger games. But this one with other sets to form a larger game. But this is a self-sufficient game. And so here we also have the Middle East, we have Greece, the Balkans, we have Italy, very important in the late game especially. We got Gibraltar, Malta. So it's really the whole thing of the South Front, hence the name. This is one of the smaller Quartermaster General games, so only for 2 players. One player will control the Germans and the forces of the Pact, the other player the UK. And like in other Quartermaster General games, first we have a card-driven mechanic which is a bit abstract and yet at the same time also kind of surprisingly thematic and detailed. And we have wooden pieces, so adorable wooden pieces representing airplanes, infantry, tanks, fleet, and also carriers. Here we go, and you can place an airplane on a carrier, which is pretty awesome. So, the game starts in the summer of 1940, and so what we have here is a lot of Italians on the board, a lot of minor countries being inactive, and we have some UK forces here. They're also holding Malta and Gibraltar, and there are some fleets in the Mediterranean. And then things will start happening. This is a card-driven game in which you will get some actions for free, by which I mean movement. You get to move every turn, and then you will use cards to activate actions. You will have a hand of cards coming from a unique deck. Then you also have contingency cards, which are actions that you can activate by simply declaring that you do so. Then you do what the text says, and each can be used twice. The first time you use it, you flip it to the other side, and now you activate that effect, which again you can activate by declaring so, and if you use the second effect of a contingency card, it's out of the game. And then you have your hand of cards from your unique deck. You will play cards to activate actions. You can play them for the effect described in the text, or not both, for the reaction indicated here when the situation applies. We'll see what that means. So we start. We alternate between Pact and Allies, and so the Pact goes, the Allies go, and then we take a turn like that. And not every turn, but only from time to time at the end of each year, we will have a scoring phase in which players score point based on the victory areas that they control, the ones there with the star. That's a major source of victory points. However, there are also many cards that, if played, will give you victory points if you meet certain conditions. For example, if you control Malta for the Allies, or you gain them unless the opponent does something. Sometimes you also have some advantages that are described on a card, but in order to activate them you're giving victory points to the opponent. Now, a turn starts with the first movement step, in which any and all of your units, regardless of composition or type, they can all move. And infantry, well, it moves like that. It moves by 1 space. Suppose that we have a tank here. Guess what? The tanks also moves by 1 space. So do the fleet. But super important, you can never enter a space with an enemy piece. So I could not move the fleet there. I could move the fleet here, or from there I'm going to move it there, which I'm going to need for supply lines. An airplane can move up to 2 spaces, but it still needs to land into a space you controlled at the beginning of the turn. You can also load units, land units onto a fleet as long as you unload it before the end of the turn. So the idea is that you will have a first movement step in which everybody can move, then you take your action using the cards that I showed you earlier, and then you will have a second movement step before your turn is over in which fleet and tanks can move again, and infantry and airplane can only move if they are unloading. Can only move if they are unloading because they can't end their turn on a boat, on a ship like that. That's the general idea for the turn structure. As for the actions, you have a very valuable, very useful player aid here that tells you all the things that you can do. You have one action. Again, you play a card for the stated effect. You can discard cards to recruit new troops, and you discard one card to recruit an infantry and two cards to recruit something a little fancier, like a tank. That tank just fell. Like a tank. You can force march, which is you discard a card to keep going, for example. Desperate attack. Usually you will want to use a card that describes an attack force in order to do so, in order to launch an attack, but you may also want, suppose that the situation is this one, you may also want to from time to time to launch an attack when you don't have a card that says so, in which case you discard two cards. And then your production initiative, I don't think I ever used that action. Discard a card to draw a card, you must be pretty desperate. We talked about using your contingency cards, so you can also pass, again, not very likely. So the actions will allow you, among other things, for example, to activate some of these neutral minor powers. For example, maybe you will activate Athens, and when you activate one of these minor countries that are neutral at the beginning, it will activate for one side or the other. Maybe I've activated Athens for the axis. You flip the token that indicates the name, you flip it into an infantry piece that, however, is like the local garrison. They cannot move, but it can defend for you, so that's pretty neat. And there are victory points to be had here. There is a card that will activate Bulgaria for the Pact, for example, and then going from there, the Pact can try, the Axis can try to go and take control of Yugoslavia. They can declare war on Yugoslavia. They can try to take control of the area. So that's how you activate these regions and become minor theaters of operation. And of course, fighting. There is fighting of two types, which is land and sea. The general idea is pretty similar. You can never share space with pieces of the opponent, so you declare an attack from an adjacent space. To declare an attack, again, either you discard two cards or you have an effect that says you're attacking. And suppose that either way we're attacking here. Now, the defender would usually need to automatically remove a game piece. I declare an attack, I show that I can, and that's it. However, they can use, this is when you can use these reactions if you have them, for example, to stand fast. Under certain restrictions, and if you play a stand fast, then you don't have to remove the piece. If you play an exchange card, you remove the piece, but so does the opponent. And so suppose that we remove the piece and it was an exchange and the opponent also removed the piece. Then that's it. Theoretically, that wasn't a lot of progress for the Axis, and so they may want to sustain the attack. In order to sustain the attack, you need to commit more resources, basically to sacrifice one of your pieces to continue attacking. And when you sacrifice a piece, it has to be it has to follow this player right here, and the one you sacrifice needs to be of the same rank or higher than the piece that the defender lost. So if the defender on the land lost an airplane, I can continue my attack only if I sacrifice an airplane or a fleet, or I play a stand fast or sustain attack card. A sustain attack for sustaining attacks. If the opponent removed an infantry, then anything, I can remove anything myself to continue the attack. And so it's a bit deterministic, but with the uncertainty, of course, of reaction effects. And that's the idea. So a combat may last one or multiple rounds in which players play cards and or remove pieces. Suppose that at the end the place that you were attacking is vacated, then maybe you're able to play a card that lets you advance into it right away, and or you can use the second step of a turn with your tanks to take control of that, for example. So this is the general idea. Each turn you take a first movement step, everybody can move, then play an action fueled by the playing of cards, have a secondary second step. From time to time, at the end of each year, score points based on control of locations, but remember you also will score points during the year because of the playing of cards, because of certain game effects. And at the end of the last year, the player with the highest score wins the game. I feel like my conclusions for the Quartermaster Journal games are all the same or very similar, but what can I say? I like them all, and I like them for the same reasons, so I'm not gonna start making stuff up just to be original. Because what I like in the system is that you have a fairly abstract and extremely manageable game system in which a lot of history has been built into the cards, the resources, the pools of pieces that people have. You do what the cards say and history happens, and it goes, of course, with what's in the cards. Also with the facts that you have multiple decks here, so you start with a certain deck and then later in the game you get more cards into it. The Axis has fewer cards to represent the fact that they are running out of resources toward the end of the war. The Allies have a lot more resources, and not just that, but it's not just that they get more cards later on, they also get more actions that allow them to chain off actions. So you play a card that says do this and play another action. Oh, I'll play this other card, it gives me another action, and that also gives me another action. So they start taking a lot of actions later on, which really shows the different tempo that the operations take after Operation Torch, as the Americans come, and becomes a lot tougher for the Axis. Matter of fact, the game reproduces the historical script so well that I was a little worried that may limit replay value. The first time that I played it, first the Italians and the Pact and the Germans did pretty well in North Africa. Then they lost the supply lines. They were forced to retreat toward Italy. As they were doing that, they also tried to strengthen the position of the Balkans because they knew they weren't going to hold the position in North Africa for long. And so things went, and then of course the Allies came in and took control of North Africa. So things went along historical lines. The Allies tried to mount an operation against Italy, but they couldn't. But I see how that could have been done. So two variants of that scenario. Then I played the game again, and it went in a completely different ways. The Pact was able to retain supply lines for longer, making it harder to take control of North Africa, just taking longer. So now the Allies were exploring political options in the East that at the time has been more like something that the Axis was trying to do. So actually it turns out that the game can go in different ways. It can have a lot more variability than I expected. I played against a human opponent. I also played it solo, two-handed, no problem whatsoever. I just had this gift that once I put down a hand of card and I pick up the other, I have no idea what's in that hand anymore. So actually I'm going to launch an attack there and I pick up the card so that side it's been attacked to see, let's see if they have a reaction, because I have no idea. Maybe that's not good for everybody, but it works for me. I was able to play two-handed solo, and this way try to test different strategies, confirming the fact that indeed there's a lot more variety here that meets the eye at first, and yet everything feels very historically grounded. Gameplay is fast. You can play this whole campaign in less than 2 hours if it was the first time that you play the game, less than that if you played solo or with somebody who already knows the game. All the good things of Quartermaster General are here. Simple, intuitive gameplay, yet incredibly historically insightful gameplay. You see the events of history coming to life on your board, and you can test different counterfactual strategies, all within a context that is extremely playable. And I like that very, very much. And this is my very positive assessment of Quartermaster General South Front.